Hello everyone and welcome to the Nerve Pod. My name is Nishita Bujala and I am an international medical graduate from India. This is a monologue podcast and focuses on everything under the sun in the fields of neurology and psychiatry, with an emphasis on discussing interesting clinical cases for not more than 10 minutes. The episodes are short, crisp, and aim to develop an interest in the brain amongst the audience. And what better way to start this podcast than to learn about the famous and often misinterpreted case of Phineas Gage, the man who survived a traumatic brain injury. His case is extraordinary and set the stage for our modern understanding of the brain and neuroscience. It was September 13, 1848. A 25-year-old railroad worker named Phineas Gage was blowing up rocks to clear the way for a new rail line. He would drill a hole, place gunpowder, then pack in sand using a 13-pound iron rod known as a tamping iron. But this instance, the iron rod scraped across the rocks and a spark ignited the gunpowder, which sent the rod flying through Gage's skull, beneath the left zygomatic arch, passed through the left orbit, left frontal lobe, and exited the top of his skull in a median line. The rod landed yards behind Gage and was afterwards picked up by his men, smeared with blood and brain. Whether Gage sustained a brief loss of consciousness or not is unclear, but he surprisingly spoke within minutes, and the men that found him drove Gage to the Adams Hotel, where he walked up the stairs like nothing happened. At 6 p.m., about 90 minutes after the accident, Dr. Harlow took over Gage's care and attended him for months, making careful notes about his physical condition and fluctuating mental state. Initially lucid, Gage became transiently delirious 2 days later. Dr. Harlow noted that at times Gage was childish, but his orientation to time was good and his memory of the accident was excellent. Against all odds, Gage returned home 74 days after the accident. Dr. Harlow commented that aside from the loss of vision in the left eye and partial paralysis of the left side of his face, Gage was in good physical health after recovery. It was only in a follow-up paper 20 years later that Harlow claimed his patient changed from a mild-mannered and hard-working individual into a profane and fitful individual whom his friends no longer recognized as the same man he had been prior to the accident. The doctor also went on to say Gage became antisocial and impulsive and had problems planning for the future. This led to the conclusion that frontal lobes are responsible for personality, problem solving, and planning. It was corroborated by the claims that following damage to his frontal lobe, he started to exhibit wild risk-taking behavior and aggression. So Gage's story teaches us about behaviors associated with acute prefrontal injury as well as the possibility of recovery from serious frontal damage. The fact that Gage later enjoyed some degree of functional recovery is perhaps as striking as having survived the accident itself. In contrast to Harlow's careful scientific reporting, other authors have distorted Gage's story over the years. The extent of Gage's personality change has been grossly overestimated, leaving the impression that he had become a sociopath. Other authors have stuck to the myth that the iron rod was still lodged in his brain when he was brought to the doctor. This case reminds us of the importance of detailed, accurate reporting of clinical encounters and of consulting primary sources when looking to the past. Those who exaggerated Gage's personality changes were supporters of localization of function in the brain, and those that underplayed them were against localization of function. This makes it particularly hard to draw definite conclusions on this case, and the lack of contemporary reports limits us further. Whether we can believe he was no longer Gage is unclear, but the exaggerated reports fit loosely with modern reports of damage to the frontal lobes. Gage died on May 21, 1860, 12 years after the incident. Dr. Harlow then obtained permission from Gage's family to have the body exhumed and the skull sent to him along with the tamping iron. They were then donated to the medical department of Harvard University and are now on display at Warren Anatomical Museum in Boston. And with that, I conclude the first case on the podcast. Thank you for listening. Please don't forget to rate it and follow our social media page for more updates.